What is up, guys? So, as many of you already know, the new Mage update was announced yesterday, along with basically all of the changes coming in the mid-season update. We'll look at the major ones briefly, the new dragons, and then a few hidden things that are going to change which aren't direct. Like this video if you did, dislike it if you didn't, and let me know what you think about this whole new Mage update. I'll link this post down below, by the way, if you want to see it. We'll look at the dragons first, then a few hidden things, and round this video out with my thoughts on the new Mage Reworks. So the dragon or dragons now are being completely reworked. We have 4 different types that randomly spawn now, each give a different buff, and they do stack together as well. I honestly feel like this is a bit like Power Rangers at this point. Fire is like damage for you in your team fighting, earth is aimed at objectives, so more damage to Baron, dragons and towers, water gives more mana and health regen, so better lasting in poke wars, and finally air grants bonus movement speed out of combat. Now after 35 minutes, these 4 will disappear though, and instead an elder dragon spawns, which is harder to take, kind of I guess a mini baron, and gives us something similar to the 5th dragon did, a burn over time on spells and attacks that is stronger with each stack of dragons you already have. So these buffs are permanent, by the way, and they stack together like 2 earth dragons will rip through towers even harder, for example. It's a cool change, right? It adds a bit more depth, it's kind of fun, it adds a higher priority to dragons and stuff, but without being a dick, why? Riot are overcomplicating something that doesn't need to be. They've messed up over and over with dragons not really being worth it, and instead of going back to when it did work, they invent this crazy new system. If you make dragon worth gold again, if you make towers have more health, reduce death timers, people would actually want to take it, and you wouldn't need to make this dragon overcomplicated. It is a pretty neat idea though, but I'm more worried that if you have a bad early game, it's even harder to come back now. There has to be a reward for taking it, like an incentive, and that means if the enemy team has 3 stacks of dragon or whatever and you have none, you're gonna be pretty screwed, right? I do get that it's punishment for falling behind, I think that's kind of fair, but it is just making the game more snowbally, surely. It's giving the winning team who can control dragon even more power and making it harder to come back when we already have stupidly long death timers and low health towers. So that is all you need to know about the dragons, really. Now we're going to go on to some hidden stuff. These aren't direct changes, but are what I think will change or become strong because of everything. So with dragons meaning more now, bot lane is going to be way more important, that is for sure. Winning bot lane will mean you can control the dragons, and picking early game champions is going to be the way to go to do that. I know we're in a tank meta and stuff, so hyper carries are kind of coming back, but if we're now fighting for dragons all the time, who would you want to have? Like a Lucian who is really strong already, or a Tristana who has no items yet? In my opinion, the game will become even more mid-game focused, and so early game AD carries will be better. More Lucian, Jhin, Misfortune, Caitlyn, just anything that has a good lane phase and can put the enemy AD carry behind. The other thing that actually isn't mentioned here is there is a Quicksilver Sash change on the PBE at the moment. I don't know if it's going to stay, but hopefully not. Basically now it won't remove anything like Zed's Death Mark or Vlad's ultimate. It only removes crowd control. I am sorry, but this is the dumbest change ever. Proper use of a Quicksilver is a core part of being a good AD carry, and now instead of looking after ourselves with that, we have to rely on our teammates for protection even more. QSS was a low-cost solution to assassins, but now we'll have to invest double that into a guardian angel or something, otherwise we're just going to die instantly. If this change does actually go through, then these immobile carries as well, like Jinx and stuff, won't be as good and will probably favor people who can look after themselves, like Lucian or Ezreal. Double TP and utility tanks are most likely going to be super strong again after this as well. These champions like Maokai and San don't really need items to absorb damage or do their job. They're naturally tanky and have built-in crowd control. This means they are better in early fights than others where people don't have the damage to get through them yet, especially they can TP flank and engage fights or TP bot lane. Sadly, that is another thing. I'd expect bot lane to become the lane to gank, because if you can win a fight there, you get 2 people off the map and you can take a dragon. I'd expect to see TPs flying into bot lane all the time now, more jungle attention, and most of the fights to be around there because it is just a more important lane to kill. This again is another reason why early game champions like Lucian will be so good. They can do a lot of damage early into the game with few items. The final hidden change, I guess, is kind of the mid-meta. We'll probably also shift more into poke or control, especially at the start of the season. I know that's probably not what it seems like with all these new mages coming in, but poke is the #1 way to secure objectives, and with these new dragon changes, everyone is going to have a major hard-on for getting them. You poke the enemy a dragon, you force them away, and take the objective for free. Let's be honest too, all these major rework champions will become super popular because they're new, and all of them are pretty weak to poke champions. So speaking Speaking of these new mages, these 6 major changes or reworks, I guess, we'll just TLDR them and my thoughts quickly on all of them as well. So Malzahar's passive acts like a Banshee's shield now, kind of. If he hasn't taken damage for a while, he gets a buff which makes him take a ton less damage and is immune to crowd control. Your Q is basically the same. His W now spawns the voidlings though instead of his passive, and when they hit a champ or monster, he spawns another one. His E is the same. His ultimate though is kind of like his old ultimate and W combined. It suppresses but now does damage AoE with that pull around as well. I think this is going to make him really strong, and maybe even a jungler because of how many voidlings he can spawn onto camps. His passive is like a free damage soak at the start of a team fight, which means that basically it's impossible to focus him. In lane, I actually don't think it's going to be that much of a problem because you can poke it down, and I don't think it'll be up much anyway. But before a team fight, he can avoid damage, and then how do you focus him? If you ever jump on him, especially if you're an assassin, he takes massively less damage, he's immune to crowd control and turns around to pump out massive damage on you or locks you in place. Brand is actually really interesting. This one is my favorite change out of all of them. He's kind of now a combo burst mage. His passive is kind of the same. It burns, but it now stacks up to 3 times. When it hits those 3 stacks, it does massive AoE damage around the target. His Q is the same, W the same, except it does more damage to people already on fire. E the same, and his ultimate the same, except it prioritizes champions that are burning. This is actually a super smart change. They've kept what Brand is, but they've made him better, and it's so good to see. There is so much potential with his passive chaining onto multiple people in a team fight, and will mean that while Brand might be easiest to start with, there's also a fair amount of room to display your skill with the champion. In my opinion, this is exactly what a perfect champion looks like. He's okay to pick up and play, but enough depth to bother mastering and show how good you are with him. So next one, Vlad. His passive, W and ult are the same really. His Q is almost the same, except it now does bonus damage the 3rd time you use it, gives you a little bit of move speed as well. His E is the major change. He charges up now, costing more health as you go, but as you charge it more, you do more damage, and it's AoE damage as well. If you remember back when I did some digging on these mage updates a while ago, Riot said they wanted to add more counterplay to Vlad and make him in general more useful. I'm not really seeing how these changes do that. I mean, it's basically the same champion, except his E is more of a damage tool instead of amplifying his other spells. We'll have to see, but this definitely looks like, again, he's going to be a top lane champion still. Zaira is up next, and remember, before this came out, they said they were aiming for her to be more of a support than anything else. Her passive is now going to spawn seeds around her randomly over time. Her Q is actually a lot like Malzahar's Q with the size and shape of it. It still does damage, and if it hits a seed, then a plant will pop up. Her W is still the same, even though her passive now spawns seeds randomly, we can place them too. Her E and ultimate are also still the same. Her ultimate expands up, flips people in the air, and enrages the plants on it. I actually really like this as well because it's not gone too overboard. It's basically like the old Zaira, just a bit more functional with more seeds. I don't think she needed a massive overhaul at all. I'm glad she didn't get one. She was pretty decent anyway, and hopefully she just stays the same that way but can use plants a little bit more. Vel Koz is a really small change actually. I don't know why they put him in the big 6. His entire kit is the same, but it's more about numbers being moved around, I think. His Q now refunds mana when you CS with it, which encourages you to max it first, and his ultimate will do true damage to people that have been deconstructed by his passive. Everything else is the same. Without much change to his kit, there isn't much to say apart from them moving him away from being this super safe wave clear champion and rewarding his poke and burst more. Now Cassiopeia is one of the biggest changes in my opinion, just because we're seeing a new form of crowd control, being grounded. It seems like this is mostly a silence really. If you think about Soraka's W when she places that field on the ground and you can't do anything, it's a lot like that. People can't flash, they can't dash, and they can't click a lantern or anything while inside it, and they just have to run through it. Her Q and ultimate are the same as before. Her W is the poison field thingy that has grounding while in it. Her E was her main damage source before, right? You needed poison on a target to actually use it properly to get the cooldown back, but it now does bonus damage instead if they're poisoned, and it also refunds the mana if the target is killed. This is making Cassio more of a control mage than anything else. actually. It's taking away some of her continuous spam for more utility, so a good ultimate or W placement will actually make a much bigger difference in a fight. This actually seems like a decent change, honestly. Damage with utility will bring her up another level to the same kind of thing that most champions have nowadays. So that wraps up this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed this overlook on the mid-season update. Let me know what you guys think. Like, subscribe, comment, share, but for now, let's go to the robots.